Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to What Matters and What More. Now, what do you mean by that? Well, if you apply to Harvard or Stanford, or have applied, you'll know what we mean because those are two core essay questions that form the heart of the application to Harvard Business School and Stanford Graduate School of Business. And we have a really cool announcement to make today. We are publishing with MBA Mission and Gatehouse Admissions a guide to writing those essays. Now, this is no mere guide. It's 188 pages full of 50 successful essays written by current students at Harvard or Stanford. And not only are we publishing the essays, but we're publishing really smart, thoughtful, meaningful critiques of each one. In fact, even of sections of the essays that will help anyone who's applying to these two schools. And with me today is one of the co-authors, Liza Wheel, who is the founder of Gatehouse Admissions, formerly of MBA Mission, and an admissions expert extraordinaire. Liza, welcome.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk about one of the essays. And in fact, in this series, we'll go through the book one by one. This essay was written by someone who was a dual applicant to both Harvard and Stanford. And the really interesting thing about this person is that we have both of his essays. We call him Lloyd in the book. Tell me a little bit about Lloyd first. I know he works in venture capital. He had worked in venture capital before going for his MBA, but tell me how he approached his essay.
Well, I think what I really like about his essay is you can see that his personal drive, the things that really motivate him, intertwine with his quest for his career. So you said it right. He is in venture capital, or he was when he was applying to business school. And he discovered it pretty early on in college, as a matter of fact, when he kind of walked away from a banking job and tried his hand at entrepreneurship. And then little by little discovered this thing that is called venture capital. And it answered a separate side of him that was very passionate about community building and networking and creating positive environments. He thought that was a separate side of him that was more volunteer work. But when he discovered venture capital, he realized how much those two sides could intertwine into his industry and his real passion. And that's the story that evolves throughout the essay.
And he starts with a two-paragraph anecdote that I think is pretty compelling because then he immediately connects it to his belief in community and what you can get from it.
Exactly. I think what he does there, and I'm always, both my co-author, Jeremy, and I were careful when we were critiquing essays here, we would call out positive things, but then also say, this doesn't mean everybody should do this. But one thing that Lloyd did very well is he does use a kind of exciting story. He reaches out to some CEO of a tech startup, we think, and on Twitter, and convinces him to come in and do a Shark Tank type activity for his firm. So immediately, this is a pretty bold story. It shows that he has he's willing to take a risk, and he's really committed to raising the bar in the communities that he's a part of. So starting with a strong story like that can be a really compelling way to draw your reader in, especially if it connects, as it does in Lloyd's case, to the rest of his essay.
Now, what else about this essay makes it work?
Let's see. I think really the biggest thing to me is this sort of intertwining between his passion of giving back and building things and what he discovers he can do in venture capital. But I think there are a few other things that make it a very effective essay. One, we get some context setting. He talks a little bit about how when he was growing up, he mentions how his parents' house was considered the local or the neighborhood community center, and it was always open for everybody. And he really had a sense of contributing right then to the community. And he mentions it early on in the essay, and it comes back a little later on in the essay, and we start to see that really Lloyd has kind of come full circle as he's discovered that this career. And I think that's a very compelling and just feels very authentic as we, the readers, see it.
Now, one of the interesting things about Lloyd is he's applying both to Harvard and Stanford, as in fact many applicants do. But in this case, we have both of his essays. And so I wonder what you make of what he borrowed from one and another, and how he approached the essays for the two different schools.
Well, this is an interesting case because we actually had an opportunity once we received the essays from Lloyd, once he submitted them for this book. We talked to him a little bit about it because the essays, and you'll see this in the guide, they're quite similar.
Yeah.
It's the same journey. And again, the headline isn't that you should always go with the same journey when you're applying to these schools, but sometimes it can work. And what he said that was really interesting is he took a very different approach at the beginning for Harvard. And he was trying to do a lot in the essay and show a lot of different components of him. And then he wrote his Stanford essay, which of course requires you to answer one singular question: what matters most? There's only one thing that matters. And as he cut out all the noise and came up with that answer for GSB, he realized that that was the right essay. That was the right story to be telling for Harvard as well. So there actually is a lot of similarity across the two essays. He doesn't mention as in depth, I think, some of the stories, but it's certainly the same person applying to both. So I think sometimes people worry they have to look a little different to Stanford or look a little different to Harvard. I think this essay, this pair of essays really demonstrates you are who you are, and that's fine. The school, that both prompts, the schools will value you. You don't have to be one version of you for one school or a different version of you for the other.
Now, Liza, obviously the essay is one part of a holistic application process. There are everything from standardized test scores, where you went to school, where you work, whether you've been promoted, your GPA. Keeping all that in mind, how important do you think was his essay in getting an admit?
It's a great question. And man, I would like to know. I really would like to know that answer. But I will say this. I mean, he clearly, there are ample examples of him taking initiative, of him really seeing things through, of him contributing to the ethos around him and supporting others. So those are all incredibly powerful traits, and traits that these schools are going to want in their future leaders. I also think, so it was mentioned in his essay, but obviously it's all over his resume too. The fact that he's already in venture capital, I mean, I can't tell you how many people that are thinking about business school who want to be in venture capital. And
Sure.
here is someone who has already started to build his career.
Yeah.
So, I have a feeling that that was also quite appealing to these schools, that here's someone who has inside knowledge of what it is like to be a venture capitalist.
And he tells a story without bragging. I mean, there's no chest thumping, and yet he conveys all of the attributes that you've just expressed, which really makes him a very appealing candidate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, even, there's a mention how he, not to spoil it for those of you who haven't read it, but he mentions how he drops out of school briefly and then goes back to school. And, he could have been a little bit more, I was so gutsy, I left and, went into this program or went to this incubator, I think it's called. And he doesn't brag about himself at all. He kind of explains his situation and why he made the decision, and leaves the reader, lets us infer those things about him, which is a really powerful way to write, certainly these essays.
Great. Okay, that is Lloyd and his two essays for Harvard and Stanford. He successfully got into one of these schools. Do you know which one?
He actually was successful at both of these schools.
How about that? No, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
And he decided to go to,
Stanford. He
all
went to
right,
Stanford.
all
Mhm.
right. So there you have it. What matters and what more. Now, if you want the book, come to Poets and Quants, order it, go to MBA Mission, order it. It's really a valuable addition. And remember, that last year alone, nearly 17,000 people answered one or both of these questions. So this will give you a sense of how people tackled it. It can be daunting. You could stare, in the old days, as a journalist, I'd stare at a blank piece of paper. Now you stare at a computer screen. This is a good way to start and get your head around thinking about what you should be saying and how you should present your best self. Liza, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to talk about the next one soon.
Indeed. All right, this is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You've been watching What Matters and What More.